In a nation plagued by tragedy and fear, there is an issue that continues to grip our attention: mass shootings. From quiet neighborhoods to bustling city streets, shopping malls, movie theaters, and sporting events to our kids' schools, this is a very real threat casting a shadow over our daily lives. The numbers speak volumes. Mass shootings have become all too frequent, leaving communities shattered and lives forever changed. But behind these statistics lie stories of pain, resilience, and a desperate need for change. We find ourselves at a crossroads where every street corner we stand on could become a battleground, and every building we enter a potential tomb. We have to address the underlying causes that fuel this violence and start a course of action to correct it. Mental health is undoubtedly a significant factor. Social isolation and feelings of alienation can also play a role in these tragic events. We must also examine the accessibility of firearms and the effectiveness of current gun control measures. The path forward is daunting. Deep-rooted divisions and political gridlock hinder progress in enacting meaningful change. We can't allow despair to cloud our vision. People across the nation are demanding accountability and pushing for legislative action. United, we can make a difference. Open dialogue, empathy, and understanding are essential in creating safer environments for our children, loved ones, and for ourselves. The need to implement effective strategies to prevent mass shootings and mitigate the devastating impact of active shooter situations is dire. Today, we hope to ignite productive conversations around the future where the threat of mass shootings and active shooters no longer darkens our nation's spirit on America's front line. We're back again today with Ken Hall, CEO of Armor Research Company. Thanks for coming again.
Nice to be here, as always.
Your ballistic armor is important in this specific issue. There's been an uptick in these shootings, and I just wanted, to ask you what your thoughts were on the issue in general.
I prefer to address mass killings. Okay, mass shootings are specific to the United States as far as statistically speaking. A recent BBC report put the number of deaths by gun as compared to murders was like 85% death by gun, but we are a gun culture, okay? That's not to say that in the other countries that were measured, same number of deaths, just a smaller percentage by gun. Okay, and the murders are murders. In China, they had a recent attack in a classroom that destroyed a bunch of kids, and it was with a knife, machetes. Okay, death is death. So I'd like to first start with that. We are a gun culture. We have always been a gun culture. When I look at this issue, there's one thing that I don't equivocate on, and that is we have a right in our Constitution to bear arms. Now, some say that I hear a lot of people, well, but you don't need that for hunting. You don't need to have an AR-15 for hunting. That's absolutely true, but that's not why it's in the Constitution. The Constitution allows the public to have the same weaponry, at least in those days, as the military. That's why they call it a well-organized militia. A well-maintained militia. The issue involved is the ability to throw off tyranny and overreaching government. And the big push for gun control, in my opinion, is to prepare the population for some form of government overreach. And I don't think our population is going to ever allow that to happen. So that taken into account, why is it that we never had this problem before, yet it peaked in 2021, and obviously 2023 we were at a ratio of 35.5 per 100,000 people ratio, which is high compared to the world. But I will say this: of those places in the United States where we have this, the United States, as an overall country, is very low. We have several states that have the most restrictive gun laws, yet they account for 87% of the shootings with weapons, with guns. So
You're talking about cities, counties.
well,
Are we talking about
go,
New York?
We could go there.
New York, Chicago, LA.
Yes, New York, Illinois,
Yep.
but because it holds Chicago.
Okay.
California because it holds LA and San Francisco, and several others. And but if you
And California has some
DC,
of the most restrictive gun laws in the nation.
the most restrictive. The most restrictive. It used to be New Jersey and New York. I think they're all in competition personally. But the result is higher levels of shooting. Why? Because the population can't defend itself. You go into a house there, nobody's going to shoot back. So I think that's really a lot of the problem. Now, with mass shootings in particular, okay, again, other statistics that are super interesting. In 2021, 60 males committed mass shootings, 1 female. In 2022, 47 males, 1 female, 1 non-binary, and 1 unidentified. The trends we're seeing for mental issues, confusion with who we are, is increasing. After the pandemic, people were in the basement, like I think that was mentioned in your opener. Those people, most of them were playing war games or shoot 'em up games where they're immersed in that environment and they're desensitizing to the effect of shooting somebody. We're teaching our youth to be killers when they're sitting in the basement and they don't have supervision. We need to address the precursors to the shootings as much as we do the shootings. Now, as a company and as a CEO, I chose to mitigate the time at which a first responder can get to the point of impact. That is how we're addressing it. And we make the fastest growing shield in America called the Compact Response Shield. It is specifically designed to be handled with one hand by a person of a large or small stature, male or female. You can return fire with it, which you can't do with most of the big bunker busters that are out there. And we recommend it be in every police vehicle in the United States because it's no good if you don't have it with you. The first responder to all these events is usually a police officer pulling up that was on patrol or in the area. Well, if he has to wait for the right equipment, that's time that people are being injured. So we need to cut that down first. That's the first thing to address. Let's get to the point of impact as quickly as possible. Let's not wait to address the threat. After that, then we need to harden our facilities. After that, we need to start working on these video games and mental issues.
So let's talk about the response time. The time between when emergency services are alerted, activated, and are able to get to the scene. And I'm hearing there's new training being instituted, whereas before it was the first person on scene will assess the situation, wait for the group, and go in together.
That's correct. That was 10 years ago.
Right.
It is altered now from there to get to the point of impact as quickly as possible, whether you're by yourself or not. Move to the shooting, move to address the threat. We've realized as a community that the time it takes to respond and get to the threat is the key to saving lives. Most of the threats either give up, shoot themselves, or do a suicide by cop once they're addressed. In some cases, the officers addressing the threat have been killed, but they didn't have any protection. You know, they're throwing their life at trying to save the rest, which they should have a rifle defeating shield with them as they're moving. If I'm going to be a single officer responding to a threat, I want to get out of my car, I want to grab my shield very first thing. I know it's an active shooter scenario. I want to put that shield up, I want to have offensive capabilities, and I want to move to the threat as quickly as possible. If I have somebody else, great. If they have a shield, that's even better. But if I don't have time to waste. The killing in Florida, or the shooting in Florida at
Parkland,
Parkland,
Scott Peterson,
Scott Peterson,
just absolved of all charges.
he was absolved. Now, here's the issue. You had a retired law enforcement officer that was not required to keep up to physical requirements, that had not trained on the range, at all in recent history, and he had heard shots where he said he couldn't tell where they were coming from. He was being asked to. You were being expected. The reason he was being sued in court, or what he'd been charged with, not responding. But you can't ask somebody to put their life in jeopardy as a matter of law. Okay, which is why he was acquitted.
What about him as a matter of morality?
Matter of morality is a different subject. He let children die, and his job was to protect them.
What do you think that was attributed to?
I think he was afraid.
You think it was confidence?
I think he was afraid. Yeah, my job, again, another one of my jobs. I want to give people that are less trained, that are less physically capable, the ability to respond to a point of impact, to solve a threat or to address a threat, and you give them this additional courage. They're moving behind a rifle-rated barrier, and that hopefully will give them enough confidence to move through the threat quickly. Now, if you're a police officer, you should be training with it, obviously. We want you to train with it. But we also are putting these into airports and schools for the people that are, the staff to be able to use to protect themselves, or to, take an act that at least gets them behind something that will defeat the round that's coming at them. Uvalde, it was a good case where they had shields, but they were rifle rated. I mean, they weren't.
They were handgun rated.
They weren't rifle rated. So they were waiting for SWAT or some tactical unit to show up. Well, the tactical unit that showed up actually uses our shields, but they went and addressed the threat immediately, knowing that time is critical. But all the time passed.
They weren't there for.
That's right. Half hour.
It took them 30 minutes or so to even get there.
So 30 minutes that threat had a chance to do harm. That's unacceptable. Now, Uvalde went through a great bit of scrutiny.
They're still going through it.
They are. They want to have individual officers able to respond quickly, and I commend them for that choice. We are pushing to have a shield in every vehicle in the United States and Canada, and it must be a rifle-rated lightweight shield that can be operated with one arm. And that is our philosophy on it, and that has nothing to do with maneuvering into the body armor conversation as well, but reducing the time to address the threat is, I think, the biggest impact we can make in zero time. As long as it takes to buy the equipment, that's all the longer you need.
So you think the CRS, or the compact response shield, if there was one in every car or one posted at every school, say at Parkland, Florida, maybe Scott Peterson wouldn't have ran out of the building. Maybe he would have grabbed that shield and had the confidence to go confront the shooter, or at least distract them, and give people more time to get out.
Yeah, and like I said, most shooters, when confronted, they just kind of, shoot themselves or whatever action they want to take to terminate. But if you confront that threat and he can physically see a shield, and you have offensive capability at the same time, your life-saving organs are covered, and he's not. They're doing this for something, but usually at the end of it, they don't want to be around to face the results. So again, the faster we get there, the faster we deal with that threat. And the shield, there was a coach that threw his life into a shooter several years ago, and he was shot. And had he had a shield, this was a football coach, okay? He could have forearm ripped that kid in the next week, okay? And, there's just so many things you can do when you can create a barrier. And yes, I think confidence is a big deal, especially for resource officers who don't get the intensive training of a law enforcement officer. And I just think that's the biggest impact we can have. Now, there are definitely other impacts. Again, hardening the schools, threat assessments being properly done, and people following the rules once you generate the hardening. Once you put all the facilities in, people violate the rules all the time. Leave a door open because it's hot.
Well, you do threat assessments.
Yes, I do.
And so let's talk about hardening the schools. What does that look like?
The architecture for schools across the country is entirely different. In the colder states, they tend to be in a building. The classrooms are all in a confined building or multiple buildings, but with multiple rooms. In the hot, really hot, the same thing. Las Vegas has you pretty much are never outside until you leave school for the day. So if a threat makes entry, he can do a lot of damage. However, the way you address that is, of course, you have access control. That's what it's all about. And leaving doors closed that should be closed, but yet still having an emergency exit, have to be addressed. In areas in Southern California, you have several wings that are out in open environment, in which somebody can stroll through from a million directions and hit a specific classroom. But it's harder for them to move through the whole facility. So that way of hardening is entirely different. You have to take a different approach. There are Eagle products that has a gun detection system that is very accurate. And there's several others. I don't like the analog versions. The Eagle system I've actually studied and were qualified on for a while. It actually digitally recognizes the caliber, if it's a long gun or short gun, and it can generate lockdowns and all kinds of stuff automatically. But then again, if you have a rifle, I can make entry. I can shoot a lock. So you need to have some ballistic barrier inside the classroom to prevent those type of things. Glass, another thing. People don't address glass. One of the recent shootings, I think it was Uvalde, they shot through the front door and then just walked right in.
I think in Uvalde, they just walked in, period.
Yeah, Uvalde. I can't remember which one it was, but they shot the front door. It was glass. Maybe it was Colorado. But
yeah, and just
they
walked
shot
right through.
Just walked right through.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, as a threat assessment, you have to start in the smallest circumference and then work your way out to the different threats. And it can be anything from a mental facility being down the block to threats that are taken where they could, how far away can a long gun shooter, have access to the children. It's just everyone's different, but I think it takes longer to do than to solve the first problem. If you shoot, we will get to you in 15 seconds and terminate the event. If it's on site, you can get almost anywhere in that school in 15 seconds. Most schools.
And do all schools have a resource officer appointed to them? Is that nationwide? Or?
It is not nationwide. It should be nationwide. And the quality of the resource officers varies from state to state. What qualifies them? There is an association of resource officers that has started, and they're starting to be a political influence, and we hope to address them in a very short period of time.
How long do you think it's going to take you to get your shields in schools? Is there any legislation that needs to be passed for that to happen, or can you just get them in schools? Who do you work with? Do you work with law enforcement or the Board of Education? Well, both?
We typically work with law enforcement that works with the schools. We have suggested a new program called the Angel Box. The Angel Box basically puts an alarm next to most of the fire alarms, a parallel alarm, different kind. And it can initiate a lockdown. It tells the teachers what's going on, but it also opens up these boxes that we have, providing ballistic blankets, ballistic shields. If you're properly trained, it could provide less lethal offensive capability. We don't want untrained people having a firearm, but with a rifle-rated shield and some less lethal, if you were trained, you could address some of those threats. If somebody was coming into a room, a teacher could put up a ballistic fold-out unit and be able to barricade her children behind. So that doesn't work if you don't have someone on their way to address the threat and draw that attention. You have to have it all.
Sounds like you should have one in every classroom, not every school.
There's been that discussion and more training, but training right now, because there's no real methodology and no uniform methodology, it varies district to district, state to state. And I think if we can sell the idea of the angel box and get it implemented, it will come up with a uniform methodology that everybody can adopt in a way to lock down classes at the issuance of the event. And that will save a lot of lives.
Is there anything parents can do to help push this forward? What can the average citizen do? Because I know that people are worried. Like this is a real worry for a lot of parents when they send their kids off to school. You know, it's a worry. It's a real thing that's happening, and I know that you know, people want to be active and to be a part of the change and to see, you know, this stop, but I don't know that, you know, they know what to do. Is there something they can do?
I think we can agree that there are many threats in our schools right now, and parents are trying to get involved, and parents are having barriers thrown in their way to influencing what the districts want to spend money on and what the teachers feel is important versus what the parents feel is important. So I think you have this inherent barrier right there right now. They're not communicating. I think we'll see a lot of movement through legislation at state levels, and maybe even within districts, but less so. I think you're going to see state laws that are starting to require something like what we have. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about the gunshot recognition technology, but again, that's reactive. And I don't believe in being reactive. I believe in being offensive and getting to the threat and stopping the threat. Just telling somebody faster is only a limit. It limits what can happen. So I think as long as we address both in a comprehensive manner, I think that is going to be the long-term solution. And then we need to work on what are the causes. But I don't think you can work on what are the causes first, and that's what everybody's talking about. Gun legislation. Well, let's enforce the laws we have, okay? And let's enforce them to the nth degree. Mental health. Let's get people the treatment they need. Officers are trained for those responses and those interactions, but they can only hold them for 72 hours if they can hold them at all. So we really do need to deal with those other situations, but there's an order of events that needs to happen. We need to mitigate the risk as much as we can, then move to the next level of threat, then the next level of threat, and then the next level of threat. But something has changed in the last decade. Something has brought this about that never existed before. And I do believe that I personally believe that it's a lot of these video games where these people are immersed and just desensitized and taught to strike pedestrians, run them over, all these things. I really do think that it's hitting in the 80 percentile of our children at some point. They're sitting there immersed in online, playing on their phone or whatever it is at way too young an age and too much screen time.
I definitely think that's something that needs to be addressed. I want to talk to you later about biometric trigger locks and maybe something in the future for your angel box. But first, I want to bring on Lieutenant Randy Sutton. Randy is a nationally known expert and commentator on law enforcement issues and has been featured on Fox and Friends and One America News Network, and is the crime and safety on-air personality for KTNV TV Las Vegas. He's appeared on hundreds of radio shows across the nation. I know he was just on one about 10 minutes ago. And he has articles published in the New York Daily News, townhall.com, the Daily Caller, policeone.com, Law Officer Magazine, Police Magazine, and a bunch of others. He's also the author of 3 books, A Cop's Life, True Blue, and True Blue to Protect and Serve. Randy, welcome to the show. I know how busy you are. Thanks for being patient with us, and thanks a lot for your time.
Sure thing.
Appreciate you having you on. I'm sitting here with
Great
Ken
to be
Hall.
here, guys.
Randy, nice to see you again.
It's always a pleasure, Ken. Always a pleasure.
So, Randy, we're talking about mass shootings, and you run a foundation for wounded police officers. They're, obviously affected by this. I just want to ask you, what does the aftermath look like for a police officer after one of these mass shooting incidents?
That's a great question, and it's something that really is concerning. Police officers throughout their entire career will see things that most human beings never will. And, seeing cruelty, seeing violence, seeing bodies that have been traumatized, seeing unnatural death, violent death. It's something that goes along with the badge. It is inevitably going to happen sometime in your career that you are going to be personally involved in some horrible, horrible situations where you are viewing or playing a role in some horrors. Now, think of the singular events that most officers will be involved in. There may be a shooting where there's a victim or maybe two victims. There'll be a traffic accident where there'll be, a victim, maybe multiple, but usually it's whatever you can fit into a car, where you'll see the violent death there. But when you're talking about a mass shooting, the level has changed, and we have seen such a increase in the number of these shootings that it is now almost to be expected that this horrendous event is going to be somewhere in your future as a police officer. I have had a number of conversations in my role as both just a police professional, in my role as a journalist, but also in my role as the founder of the Wounded Blue, which helps injured and disabled officers, whether those injuries are physical or emotional, psychological. And I can tell you that some of the devastation that goes on within that officer, within an officer, when they are subjected to a mass shooting, can be absolutely career-ending, as well as causing permanent psychological issues. So it's a real issue. It's you can't prepare yourself for it. We try to prepare our police officers for all the eventualities, but it can't happen. You just can't. You can't understand the reality until it actually confronts you.
I watched the. It was a piece on the Uvalde shooting, and it was the whole story with Anderson Cooper, but it showed the behind the scenes and some of the body cam footage of the aftermath and what the officers experienced when they came out of that room and out of that school. And they were retching, throwing up, crying. It's I can imagine the emotional toll that it takes on an officer. And on the flip side, it's got to take a lot of bravery and confidence to go into something like that, knowing that's what's coming. A lot of Ken and I were talking earlier about Scott Peterson in the Parkland shooting, and we're talking about the compact response shield, and if that would give him some of the confidence that he could have stayed there, and stayed in it. What does that look like? And now that you've told us the aftermath of these situations, what does it look like being a police officer, knowing you're the one running towards the threat, you're the one running towards the guy shooting at you to protect people, kids? What's that like?
I've been following the Scott Peterson case since it began. I actually have a very good friend who was one of the original officers responding on that. In fact, he wound up being a witness at the trial, and he actually contacted me right after it happened to tell me what he saw, and that Scott Peterson basically froze and stayed outside while he, from a different jurisdiction entirely, went in to confront the gunman. And so, as a police professional, I was mortified when I heard that this guy wouldn't go in, that he basically just sat outside and allowed those children to be shot. Now, I say that because as a police officer, I know what's expected of me, and I would think that, let me put it this way: I would want to think that everyone that wears that badge would have the courage and the commitment to do what you need to do, and that is, you go in, you do what needs to be done, and you risk your life to do it. Listen, that goes along with the badge. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're in the wrong profession. Now, that being said, we got to be really, upfront and honest. And that is, very often, you don't know how you're going to react at that moment. Some people call it facing the dragon. When you face the dragon, how will I act? And the truth be known is, unless you are confronted with that situation, you honestly don't know how you're going to act. Now, one of the tools that we utilize in order to prepare yourself for the confrontation that may never happen is what we call crisis rehearsal. That you envision yourself in every type of mortal combat. And you visualize it, and you always visualize, did you come out the winner? Did you survive? And that's crisis rehearsal that is so vitally important. And it's something that police trainers utilize. But at the end of the day, you don't know how you're going to act until it happens to you.
Randy, you and I I've had the pleasure of knowing you for the last year and a half or so, and I know that in your life you've faced, you can talk firsthand about a lot of this. I also know that I've sought your advice and guidance when developing our compact response shield and techniques and who we should talk to, and you've just been a huge asset because of your knowledge base. Do you think that the addition of something like that people can get behind, maybe a less trained or less youthful officer like a lot of the resource officers, does that give them an additional bit of confidence, or does it still require the same level of training as an on-duty police officer would do? Or do you have an opinion on anything about those type of tools being available when the event happens and getting to the point of impact as quickly as possible?
I do. I am absolutely 100% a huge supporter of the compact shield. I've seen it, I've touched it, I've felt it, I've held it. Well, that almost sounds a little weird, doesn't it? But I know the power of this shield. That's why I am such an outspoken proponent of it. And I do believe that it is a life-saving device. And it would, without a shadow of a doubt, give a police officer a boost in the confidence of going into that situation. And the compact shield is a very versatile tool. It's tailor-made for active shooter incidents. I mean, it's you couldn't ask for anything better. But it's also a very useful tool for other other avenues of law enforcement, as far as even walking up on a car that may be have a high risk individual in it. It's just such a versatile tool, and I believe and I'll shout it from the tops of the mountains, should be in every single police car in America. That shield will save lives. That shield should be in every single police car in America. And I'm gonna tell everybody that I have any sway over that is the facts. That's not even conjecture. That's a fact.
In the course of running your the Wounded Blue, you've reached out and helped officers in many ways. But with regard to the mass shooting and the PTSD that is sure to follow, I personally know that you've been very active in the new forms of treatment that are going on. Do you see a lot of your officers that have been involved in these shootings and that are trying to recover from that trauma? Do you see them having to seek secondary care, or are they able to just get over it?
That's a great question, and the reality is that everybody processes trauma differently. Every single one of us could go through the exact same set of circumstances. We can be standing next to each other when an incident takes place, and we do what we have to do. And I may process it differently from you. I may be very, very affected by it, and you may go get a cup of coffee afterward and not think about it twice. It literally is just a matter of our differences in our own humanness. So, and you really can't forecast it. You really don't know what it is that's going to bother you. I tell you, one of the most vivid memories I have of the mass shooting at the hotel here at the Mandalay Bay, because I dealt with a lot of, and I still to this day have interaction with police officers who were there and who were severely affected by it. Some are no longer police officers because of it. One of the most vivid thoughts was, it wasn't the carnage that he saw. It was the haunting sound of cell phones that were strewn in the affected area that were going off all through the night. Now he hears a cell phone go off, and it is traumatizing for him. So who would even think of that, right? Who would even think that would be a causation for some serious post-traumatic stress injury? I use the word post-traumatic stress injury more often than I use post-traumatic stress disorder, because it is an injury and it can be fixed, just like a broken arm can be fixed. So it doesn't have to become a disorder. It can be treated, and we're getting better and better at doing it. We're finally actually admitting that post-traumatic stress injury exists. Remember, this is fairly new in the world of policing. It was denied for years. Wait a minute, what are you talking about? Post-traumatic stress? What? Suck it up, Buttercup. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard that phrase in conjunction with some of the horrors that police officers go through. But that was expected of us back then. You may get, when I first became a cop, if you killed somebody, you'd be back at work the next day or the day after. You wouldn't even have time to process what just happened. And that was expected of you. Now we are smarter. We're a little more in tune with mental and emotional well-being for police officers. And I'm deep in that space, because the Wounded Blue is, that's all we deal with is injured, disabled police officers, whether those injuries are physical or emotional and psychological. So, this is my world. And now I'm sounding like Jesse Waters. I get so I witnessed this. I participate in it. I'm part of these conversations, and I'm happy to see that we've actually developed as a profession where we're understanding things better. But we're still at the very beginning. We haven't mastered this, and I don't know that we ever will. I think the best we can do is keep on doing our best and keep on trying to understand and keep on trying to, with empathy and understanding, help our brothers and sisters go through the processes of dealing with the traumas that we face.
Well, I certainly know the good work that you've done, and I want to personally thank you once again in public for all that you do and all that you have done and all that you have sacrificed. And I know what a burden it is.
Thanks, Randy. For giving us this insight. The eeriness of the unanswered calls of the cell phones, I think, is something that I don't think anybody would have thought of. It's sad to think about. It's tragedy. Those are lives lost. And the officers, that deal with this, you're doing a great service for them. So thank you for that. You're doing great work over there. The Wounded Blue, what an incredible organization. So thanks for taking your time, Randy. We really appreciate it.
Well, before we say goodbye, I'd like to talk about the third annual National Law Enforcement Survival Summit that we're going to be holding in Las Vegas, September 26th through the 29th. We've developed an incredible training program. It's 4 days of every aspect of surviving a law enforcement career. Physically, of course, tactically, yes, but emotionally and psychologically and spiritually and relationships and even fiscally. There's so much that goes into surviving a law enforcement career. And this is some of the most important training that a police officer can avail himself or herself of. So I urge, if you're a law enforcement officer, that you go to thewoundedblue.org, that you see what this is, who we are, and you take advantage of this incredible training. And the other side of this coin is, I don't have a conference where there's not some fun involved. So we've got some cool stuff happening. We've got some pretty cool entertainment. I got some surprises coming up, and I can tell you from the past that those who attend this, their lives can change because of it. So any police officer who's watching this, or someone, if you know a cop, let him know or her know that this training exists and the Wounded Blue is there for them. We have a very, very important motto, and it's on everything that we do, and that is never forgotten, never alone.
Randy, I had the pleasure of being at your summit last year, and I can tell you it was life-changing for me. And again, I'll back your comments. It is something that I think every police officer, especially young police officers, should attend. You will know more about your profession and how to survive it than you would have ever known otherwise.
For sure. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on as always. You guys are providing technology that is life-saving for law enforcement officers. I know of your commitment to the men and women who are putting their lives on the line and doing everything you can through your scientific means, your knowledge, your incredible creativity when it comes down to the creation of products that can be life-saving for police and military as well. And your commitment to this community is second to none. So, I chose to do what I do because of the commitment to the people. You have chosen to do what you do for your commitment to law enforcement and the military. So, I'm happy to be not just associated with your company, but to be in your company as well. I can tell you, the viewers and the listeners, that Ken Hall is truly, truly committed to the men and women of law enforcement and the military. So I'm proud and honored to be here.
Thank you, Randy. I'm proud to be affiliated with you and to be your friend.
Randy, thank you again. If you're a police officer, go to thewoundedblue.org, sign up for this summit, and more importantly, if you're a sponsor, go to thewoundedblue.org, pledge some money towards a great cause. Ken, thank you so much for coming on
thank
again.
you for having me again. It's very enlightening, and I think it's a really important subject matter, and I'm hoping it will be more out in the public and people will talk about it more openly and not just shy away because we don't know what to do. I just think that we need to take it piece by piece and bite by bite, and let's correct it together.
I'd agree with that 100%, Ken. Join us next week on America's Frontline, where we're going to talk about gun violence.